One way of viewing it is you're teaching your students how to cheat. And yeah, you include ethics in here, but one way of reading this is you're encouraging your students to use AI, and that essentially is a form of cheating.
Yeah, I'm scared of the future, to be honest. I don't know what it's going to be in the future, but I feel like technological dependence might be even more common in 2049. And and I'm also scared of I'm also scared of how perhaps those science fiction movies will become reality. You know, how AI will start their revolution against humans.
So welcome, Cassie, to Mindshift. Really pleased to have you here. Could you tell us a little bit about your kind of academic experience, your current academic role, and then lead us into a discussion of your experience of AI within that role and your recent research project?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So my name is Cassie. I'm one of the academic English tutors at the University of Manchester. So in my job, I mainly work with international students, teaching them academic and language skills that they need to succeed at university. Um, so that's my role. That's what I do at the moment. So in the past few years, with the emerge of let's say, oh yeah, in the past few years with the growing popularity of GenAI, I have become very interested in how it's changing the way students learn and the way we teach. And um, I I'm currently researching integrating AI literacy into EAP context, so English for academic purposes contexts.
Fantastic. And I mean, I don't know how familiar Robert is with this, but for people who are watching this who are not familiar with EAP, can you give us a little bit of a sense of what EAP tries to do and the kind of students that it commonly engages with?
Yeah, of course. So EAP, or English for academic purposes, um, courses usually teach students skills that are critical for their academic success. So skills such as research and study skills, for example, finding and evaluating sources, critical thinking, referencing, independent study. Also, writing skills, very important for university students. So they can learn how to paraphrase, how to summarize, how to write paragraphs, how to develop an argument. And also like speaking skills like presentation, seminar skills, how reading skills like how to read a journal article, listening skills, how to listen to a lecture and take notes, for example. EAP students are mostly international students, so those whose first languages are not English. In the context of pre-sessional courses, which usually take place in the summer, um, the majority of students are those whose English levels are just slightly below the requirements, and therefore they have to study EAP full time for a couple of weeks or a couple of months before they can start their degree programs in September. In the context of foundation year and in-sessional courses, um, students study EAP alongside subject modules as part of their university study.
Thank you, Cassie. And Robert, is that familiar to you as a kind of an area of academic work in English universities?
Yeah, I'm kind of familiar with people doing this type of work. And I think it's really important when you think about, particularly with the number of students who are coming from other countries for whom English is second language. It's really, really important in terms of their studies. It also strikes me from my experience of working with similar students that these are some of the students and some of the skills you've been talking about are the ones that are most affected by AI. So I'm guessing, as AI's come in, you've really seen a change in perhaps how students approach your class and perhaps the needs of students and perhaps their engagement with what you do. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think the most challenging is written assessments, I would say. So many EAP assessments are written coursework like essays, literature reviews, reports, and they are particularly vulnerable to GenAI. So a lot of universities, including ours, are introducing the Viva as an assessment. Some other universities are bringing back to closed book exams in response to this issue because, as you can imagine, it's getting more and more difficult to accurately assess students' level of language proficiency if they use GenAI to write for them. So yeah, but why I think that EAP assessments will need to change, and they are changing at the moment. I believe that the value of the skills that we teach students on EAP courses are very important. So I think, why GenAI can arguably support some of the skills like paraphrasing or summarizing. Students still need to learn these skills simply because the skills are essential for them to succeed in an academic environment. Without research skills, language skills, study skills, students are very likely to struggle.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting about EAP, and I think you hinted at this, Robert, is that it's a kind of a stress test, really, for how in education we can respond to the greater usage of AI tools by students, because what we want to do is equip students with genuine language facility, genuine critical skills, genuine communicative English. And what we're not always sure about is to what extent that's being aided by AI to an extent that means that those skills are not embedded in the student, but they're being outsourced right to the technology. Which brings us on to your paper, Cassie. Can you tell us a little bit, first of all, about what kind of prompted you wanting to engage in that kind of research, which is developing an AI literacy module for students on foundational course, and talks a little bit about sort of the methodology and approach that you used in that.
Yes, of course. So this research project started in the summer 2023 when my colleague and eventually research partner, David Hasty, started to notice an increase in the number of potential AI-generated essays. So we say potential because it's hard to tell it for sure, but we could see we had suspicion that those essays were written by AI, not students. And we also had informal chats with our students, and we could see that while some students were proficient at using GenAI, many did not know how to use these tools, but they wanted to learn because they could see that the tools could support them with their study. So then we looked at the literature back in 2023, and a lot of researchers back then didn't have any, concrete approach, but all recommended that AI literacy should be taught explicitly rather than banning students from using the tools. Because back in the day, there were a lot of questions about banning GenAI. And then throughout that summer of 2023, we started to develop this EAP module in which AI literacy is integrated in every step of the writing process. There's a module focused on writing skills to help students to write an essay. So in the module, we had lessons about how to brainstorm ideas, how to find sources, how to outline your writing, then how to structure your paragraph, how to revise your writing. And we showed how AI can support students in those stages of the writing process. We included recommendations on AI tools, which we thought might be the most useful for our students. We also emphasize a lot critical evaluation of AI output and ethical considerations as well. So we piloted the module with a small group of students in September 2023, and then we started implementing it across our foundation program of around 40 students in January 2024. We collected data from students before and after the module using surveys and interviews. And the data showed that students became much more critical of GenAI. So some students said that before they thought that AI was always right, but then they started to recognize the limitations of the tools. The students also felt much more confident in using these tools effectively and appropriately. So since our paper was published in late 2024, I've been informed that colleagues from other institutions have tried to develop and implement similar modules. And I think this is very encouraging. And at the University of Manchester at the moment, we are exploring how we can integrate AI literacy into our pre-sessional courses.
Can we get a little bit into what we mean by AI literacy? Because I'm guessing for a number of people that might be quite a new concept and they might not be used to that.
So the definition of AI literacy that I'm using is taken from the two researchers called Long and Mageko, and according to them, AI literacy means the ability to use AI tools effectively and ethically.
And are there different aspects of AI literacy? And what are the key areas that you look at through a course specifically on AI literacy? You've talked about a number of those already, I know, but I just wonder if is there theory on what the different elements of literacy are around AI?
Yes, of course, yeah. So one of the elements is prompt engineering. If you use GenAI, you know that how you request it to do something can affect the output that you receive. The way you word things, the way you write your prompt can impact the results, AI responses significantly. So and so in my module, I taught students how to prompt AI effectively. Another element is understanding the inner workings of GenAI tools, so how these tools work under the hood. So what I mean is teaching students, showing students how these tools are trained, and so how these tools use data from across the internet as training data, and how because of that the tools can make mistakes, the tools can be biased, so that students can be critical of whatever tools they choose to use. The third element, I would say, is tools and applications. So there are thousands of AI tools out there, and students want recommendations for the ones which are the most useful for them. So I focus on those that are the most useful for my students' academic needs. So for example, tools that can help them with brainstorming, tools that can help them with finding academic sources, but also not just, it's not just introducing the tools, but also help them to be critical of these tools. So for example, I got students to compare two tools of similar purposes so that they can see which one works better for them. And it's up to them to make informed decisions on the tools they choose to use. And the final element, which I think is also the most important one, is ethics, right? So what would be considered ethical use of GenAI in academic contexts, but also beyond, like things like environmental impact, like data security. We also have to be very mindful of those things. So those are the elements that I included in my module, alongside the typical academic skills and academic language that we usually teach on EAP courses.
Did you find that students were quite unaware of a lot of those ethical considerations? So, yeah, you mentioned like there's the environmental impact of AI. There's also potential kind of bias of certain, so along sort of gender lines. Particularly, I was reading an article only yesterday actually, which showed the number of women involved in both AI research and development and AI companies is vanishingly small. So this is a technology almost entirely, developed and run by men, which would also go for a lot of technologies. I mean, it's not specific to AI, right? But it's particularly concentrated in that. So do you feel that, and I'd be interested to know Robert's impression of this, our students are kind of aware of just how many ethical issues are raised by the implementation of AI in education?
Yeah. So when I first taught this module in September 2023, I could see that there was a lack of awareness. But over time, I could see that students are becoming more aware of the issues. Perhaps not all, but they are becoming as students themselves use these tools more. I could see that they are becoming more aware of the tools, ethical issues, ethical problems, and I also, with a lot of media coverage about this topic. If students are curious, then they might have read or heard about some of these problems. Like these days, we have Grok and how the tool creates sexualized photos of women and children. If you read the news, and you would be aware of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Robert?
I'm interested in terms of one way of viewing this. You're teaching your students how to cheat, and yeah, you include ethics in here. But one way of reading this is you're encouraging your students to use AI, and that essentially is a form of cheating. And I'm sure that would be an argument some people would put. How would you respond to that? And does teaching this mean they're going to use those more effectively in ways that they won't be found out? All of these kind of issues. How do you feel about that?
Interestingly, Robert, a couple of weeks ago, I had a meeting with two business lecturers who had this exactly same argument. Yeah. So it seems that quite a lot of academics are associating AI literacy instruction with more cheating. And I have to disagree completely with that. Why? I don't think more AI use means more cheating. The thing is, students are already using GenAI. They are using it a lot more than we think. Um, Reports on students' use of GenAI have said that students are using these tools not just for their academic study, but also for their daily life, like, for example, helping them to manage the time, giving recommendations on for trips or for holidays, etc. So I think, yeah, it's students are already using it a lot. And my point of view is it's better that they use it without guidance rather than without. So I think that's the aim of my module here, guiding students towards effective use and ethical use. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just sort of taking up Robert's point, I've been doing a little bit of my own research, which is that I've been trying to use it more in a dialogue about an academic subject that I know a lot about to see how far it can go, where I think its weaknesses are, and so on. I think one of the things that's worried me about engineering prompts and teaching students how to get better at engineering prompts is that the more you are able to refine what you ask it, the more you're kind of able to do two things, I think. One is to mask the involvement of AI in your writing. So, of course, you can say to AI, this paragraph seems a little bit stiff academically. Could you humanize it for me? And secondly, you can also you can kind of use it to develop thinking that you're not capable of yourself by the quality of your engineering prompt. Yeah. So and I've only learned that by doing this little research project on my own about my own thinking. So what do you think universities and educational establishments can do to put in some guardrails around those kinds of things, where what we're training students to do is to get better at the prompts, but actually what that's doing is short-circuiting their thinking process. They're cutting themselves out a little bit of the loop. So I've asked it a few things, for example, about things that I know quite a lot about, but not, I'm not an expert about. And I could see that I could end up writing an answer about that thing. Let's take, I don't know, psychology of music. I could end up writing a very convincing answer about something simply because I was very good at knowing what the prompts were, but I wasn't very good at the outcome. Yeah. But the outcome looked like it had come from me, but I'd outsourced that. So what's your feeling on that, and how would any kind of module in the future that promoted AI literacies address that, Cassie?
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think it brings back to the question of how do we assess students. So if we continue to assess students with writing only, then I think we might not have an accurate picture of students' understanding of the subject. And I think um, arguments have been made, which I totally agree, is that we should move from assessing writing to assessing thinking. So rather than just look at a paper and mark it, I think we need to see how students think, assess how they make decisions, how they provide rationale for the decisions, which means that I think assessments like Viva will become much more common. Um, um, so that's why a lot of EAP courses now have the Viva element. Um,
I'm a bit worried that we head back into slightly older ways of assessment. I guess my concern here is that over the last 50 years or so, we've removed things like Vivas and timed essays and exams. A lot of that's gone because the argument being that it's not really real world. Some people can cram that information, and then they're not necessarily the people who are going to fare best in society. Are those really the skills we need? And my concern is I can see people moving back to those old assessment approaches, and it doesn't actually address the needs of society and the reasons for having a university in the first place. We end up in the place where we test skills that aren't actually needed in society, and the wrong people get the highest grades.
I was just going to say, I totally agree with that. I think where we're struggling, and we've talked about this already, Robert, in our other podcasts, is how to get out of that kind of dilemma. Like, we don't just want to go back to older forms of assessment, nor do we want to get caught in some, there's this idea that if universities persist with current forms of assessment, you'll end up with this kind of soulless education, this it's doomerism, where everything is this kind of technologically sanitized academic output. So how we guard against that by reinventing assessment really from the ground up, I think is the challenge of education at the moment. What I'm not seeing, and I don't know about you two, be really interested to know is where those ideas are kind of coming from. Yeah, we've got the Viva. My experience of the Viva is that it can be gamed by AI, and it's the main problem with it, which is that students prepare their Viva with AI unless it's a genuine Viva where you don't tell them what you're going to be asking them specifically. So yeah, be interested to know both of your kind of views on how we get out of that dilemma.
so recently I read a paper, and it says that with this with this emergence of AI tools, there is virtually no AI-proof assessment. So the way forward is to accept that trade-offs are inevitable. So we have to compromise one way or another. So the Viva, we might have to compromise authenticity because, like Robert said, perhaps that's not something like our students do a lot in real life. But then if we continue with writing, we have to accept that students might be able to use GenAI to use it. So I don't think for now, I don't think there's any way out except for the fact that we have to accept trade-offs. And depending on our context, depending on our students, we might choose to compromise with some trade-offs than others. Yeah.
I keep on going back to this idea of communities of practice legitimate peripheral participation, Wenger. It's the theory. And in there, they talk about what is genuine practice. How do people work? And for me, I think the way that academics work is changing. And we've had some interviews with people saying actually the way that academics are going to write, how academics are going to research is changing. So the fundamental task that we ask people to do is being done in a different way. So that means that we're not looking at how we ban AI, how we use AI, which is kind of the literacies you're talking about to some extent. But we need to get our minds around the fact that increasingly academic work is going to be AI assisted, and the skills that you're promoting are going to be core academic skills. If you want to write a really good research paper, we're going to expect you to be able to work quicker and with greater impact because you can read a lot more papers a lot quicker, synthesize that knowledge, take those findings to find the gaps in the knowledge to really pinpoint where you do your research in the future. And the evaluation of that research data is going to be done quicker. And actually that's for benefit of society. And just simply training people not to use AI is just completely the wrong way to go. So part of me thinks actually what we should be doing rather than trying to ban it and say it's cheating is to go, actually everything is changing for our society. How do we use it? How do we train the use of it? And if you can't use it, you're not going to be really very useful in the workforce in the next 20, 30 years, probably anyway.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Robert. And a lot of companies these days are looking for candidates with AI literacy. In fact, if you look at some of the EAP jobs, permanent EAP jobs lately, you might see that some university have included AI literacy as like sometimes it's essential requirement, sometimes desirable requirement. So the job market is changing as well. So we as teachers have to equip students for this changing job market.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is accurate. I think there's no way that we can have courses that don't acknowledge and try and embed AI skills. I suppose one of the things that I'm looking for universities to try and think around is what might assessment practices be, which really focus on critical thinking or developing kind of interesting perspectives on things that aren't just go away, use a written format and then come back and submit it. So I don't know, kind of in-class exercises that might be assessed where we're thinking around and brainstorming topics. And I think it would be really good if we started to prioritize and privilege those kind of critical thinking skills and recognize how they can be gained by AI and adjust our practice as a result. I don't know if you two would agree. I mean, I don't know how that's going to be done, by the way.
I think reflective practice might be key here because an AI doesn't know your experience of your life. And the ability to reflect is a core skill. I'd say almost a core literacy of using AI, the ability to reflect on what the AI gave you and see if it's appropriate to the context and if it has loose ends in it. So for me, it's that, and that's so personalized. Well, the AI can't fake that very easily. It can support it, but it can't fake it.
Yeah, Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, reflective practice is pretty well embedded, isn't it, Cassie, in the kind of work that we do. We really encourage our students to engage in that. Again, it can be gamed by AI. So I've certainly had students who've gone away and written their reflection, using AI. I suppose I'm thinking of more kind of like new practices that we haven't really seen in education before, perhaps where we're getting group work, we're getting people to go out of the classroom, we're getting people to problem solve, we're getting people to kind of really, yeah, to really enhance and then to see whether we can find new ways of understanding what that kind of critical thinking will look like in the world of AI as we go
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah, I agree. But then we have to accept that those assessments are likely to be less practical than writing an essay, right? It's going to
Yes.
take a lot of work from us teachers to set it up, to mark, to standardize, etc. So again, yeah, it's no perfect assessment. We have to accept that, um, we have to compromise something or another.
Yeah. I mean, I think it gives us another sort of space within which we can bring in some things into classroom discussion. So one of the things I mentioned to you, Cassie, in the run up to this is a particular concern of mine and something we've talked about on the podcast, which is increasing loneliness amongst students, particularly undergraduates, which seems like one of the great tragedies of where we are in our kind of societal development, which is that the more we equip students to engage with technology rather than humans, the more we're kind of atomizing people within our kind of social structures. And that again seems to me something that universities could try and encourage away from by promoting forms of assessment that require collaboration, for example, real world collaboration. So I'd be interested to know, Robert and Cassie, what you think of that issue and what your experience of it is. Because I've certainly, having worked in universities for 35 years, I've definitely seen that. A funny little thing actually came up in the local paper, which I'll share with you the other day, which is I don't know if you used to do RAG Week, but at Sheffield University there used to be this kind of student week where students would dress up in kind of crazy clothes and they'd go around the city and they'd fundraise, right, by doing crazy activities, climb on the top of buildings, all kinds of weird things. And it used to be when I was a student here, it used to be like a big social event. And the article was looking at the demise of those kinds of things and why they'd happened and how they functioned as a really kind of important way of students meeting each other, early on in their degree and so on. And then we haven't really replaced those kind of things. What we're finding is students going back into their dorm rooms, getting onto WhatsApp, engaging with technology. So what do both of you sort of think about that kind of tendency with the way that we engage with technology? It's not just AI by any means; it's the internet generally, and how universities might again start to sort of tack back against that.
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, sometimes I feel like there's a bit too much of technology in the classroom these days. You know, so now for on-campus students, they are expected to bring computers or tablets to the classroom to access materials on virtual learning platforms. And then there's an expectation that teachers should integrate technology in the classroom by using tools like Padlet, Mentimeter to collect live feedback, I mean real-time answers from students. At the same time, I've noticed that some students use GenAI in the classroom to guide the study, and then some who struggle with listening skills use tools to simultaneously translate what the tutors or lecturers are saying. So yeah, I think it's a lot of technological use in the classroom, and I think that can be a source of distraction. So I think some digital detox from time to time might help. So like some sessions in which no technology is used, just pen and paper, talk to each other. Your partners are the best resources rather than any tools, so that we can restore some kind of togetherness in the classroom. Just like what you said, to encourage more collaboration in the classroom rather than just working with your devices.
Yeah. What do you think on this, Robert? Have your views kind of evolved or changed since we've started the conversation, or where are you
Yeah,
at with that?
I'm still broadly in the same area to some extent. I see possibly slightly more concerns, but it flags up another issue, which is, and it came up during COVID, which is a lot of this is a pedagogical issue with faculty, and I think there's an issue with universities. I know an organisation like HEA qualification starting to address it. But if you think a lot of teachers have what I would describe as a practice, they have a practice of education as opposed to being professional educators. And so they replicate how they were taught when they were at university, and they think that's how it should be done. And that's their pedagogy, and it's a practice. They repeat the same approach year after year, possibly with the same papers and the same lectures. And I think what we're seeing, what we saw during COVID, and what we're seeing right now is that that's not good enough. It's not possible just to have a practice because education is changing so much. And unless you can get under the surface of what it means to actually learn and the processes of learning, then you're really stuffed because this is breaking it. And the proxy we've had for years and years is the essay is a proxy for thinking. If somebody can write a good essay, then they can think well. And what's happened now is that's broken. That's fundamentally broken. That proxy is no longer there. You can write a good essay, or you can have a good essay produced, and it doesn't demonstrate you can think at all. It just demonstrates perhaps you can prompt now. And it's a pedagogical issue. How do we, like Cassie was saying, how do we work with students in active ways that get them thinking? Sometimes with computers, sometimes outside of computers, and it's a teaching or learning issue.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the interesting things will be to see how teacher training, right, adapts to this, because again, one of the things that we've got in terms of all of the existing kind of paradigms of, yeah, as you said, what does teaching practice look like, and how do we train humans to do that well? Well, a lot of that was predicated on notions that just don't exist anymore, really. Perhaps we need to start emphasizing human to human interaction. I mean, what's the purpose of education? So the purpose of education used to be to provide people with qualifications so that they could execute their jobs well. But because we don't know exactly what those jobs in the future will look like, education's got to kind of rethink that. But I think also it needs to do something very humanistic, which is to prepare people to live happy and well-balanced lives as much as that's possible within the kind of future paradigms of human plus machine that we're gonna find in all aspects of our life, right? Like whenever we do something now, you already mentioned, Cassie, if you go on holiday, oh, I'll get AI to plan me a route for a holiday. I don't know what restaurant to use. I don't know how to make this lemon drizzle cake. I'll use, I'll get AI to find me the best recipe. So that kind of that dialogue with an external thing is going to kind of is already embedded. I mean, one of the interesting things is that a lot of the AI developers are saying that we're at the equivalent of the Model T Ford in terms of where we were with car development. So we're right at the beginning of a process which over the next kind of 10, 20, 30 years, of course, is going to accelerate exponentially. So one of the things I think that education can do is to try and correct for that around what are human values, what will it be to lead a well-balanced, happy life in 2050, 2049, to use the the date of our podcast name. And I think that that's a conversation that hasn't really, I don't know about, again, you'd be interested in what you guys think, hasn't really developed at pace in education.
I have a question, which is, should universities be doing that? Um, or is that something that really should happen more in primary and secondary education? Like, do we need universities to do that? And I think that's a really interesting question in lots of ways about what actually is the role of the university. And I think that's where we're going to come to your why question. The what and the why of education. I think the things that are really going to be rocked by this. We have this. I think a lot of what you've said is correct in terms of education has been predicated on workforce and workforce development. And it's been done for a long time. And even the arguments for why we could now charge for university degrees is that you will earn more money. It's not that you'll know more and conserve more, it's that you will learn more. And it kind of the underpinning of this has all been financial. And I think as we shift, I think that what and why is going to change. And I'm not sure how. But I think you're right. It's probably going to be about personal skills and interaction. But that's a very fundamentally different thing. or very different rationale to why we've ever had universities in the past. So I can see a fracturing coming up. I think we're going to get a lot closer to pure research universities. So that role of research, government funded research through university is going to be key. But I think the educational side, I think that's going to potentially be quite different.
Mm. Cassie, what are your thoughts on this biggest of topics?
I'm just thinking about the film Wall-E. Have you watched it? Uh,
I actually haven't seen it. Okay, so it's on my list. But I know
so
of it. I know the premise.
yeah, so in that film, it shows that, humans in the future will be, really fat and lazy. We just sit and lie down, and then the computer will do everything for us. And yeah, I'm scared of of that future, to be honest. Yeah, I don't know what it's gonna be in the future, but I feel like technological dependence might be even more common in 2049, and and I'm also scared of other. I'm also scared of how perhaps those science fiction movies will become reality. You know how AI will start their revolution against humans, and
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's scary. But I've read that it might be starting. AI is starting to become autonomous, and then become to make decisions outside of our control.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Robert and I both previously kind of expressed concerns about that. I was reading something that I hadn't seen the other day, which is that the developers at a lot of these AI companies, I was reading one about Claude, which haven't used myself. They have a kind of a team of researchers who are trying to understand how the AI is developing. And they wrote a sort of an internal paper that was leaked the other day, which basically was like, we don't understand, we're kind of losing a sense of how it's now developing. And we're getting a little bit kind of concerned because it seems to be, yeah, developing some levels of autonomous behavior, but also it's just that we're not understanding exactly how it's coming up with it's kind of late. So I think that kind of thing is very concerning. And I think the fact that what's being driven, what the kind of the momentum underneath these tech companies is not human well-being, right? They're not sort of public organizations with human well-being at their as their most important priority.
We're back on that conversation. I'm still not convinced. I think there are multiple motivations, but a company particularly like Claude, they spend a lot of money on R&D. In fact, they're having those conversations and they're regularly publishing papers and testing AI in ethical ways. And they've even got into a battle with the US government. They could have made a lot more money recently and they decided not to. So I just don't want to see them all as the bad guys. In that way, I think it's two dimensional.
Hmm.
And
I
possibly
hope you're
doesn't
right.
help us. I'm not saying that everybody's the same. It's going to be challenging. The issues, one of the things, because you're talking about research has come up recently. One of the things that I was seeing is that, and I've seen about it before, if you give it a task, very often it will go, can I do this task easily? And if the answer to that is no, it will then look to cheat. And and that's the issue where you go, okay, well, can you help us because the planet's dying with carbon dioxide and et cetera, et cetera. Can you help us fix this? What are the ways we can fix it? And it becomes autonomous. And instead of finding useful ways to help us as humans, it goes, well, let's exterminate the humans who are the issue. And that is the problem because the more it goes, okay, what's the easiest solution? I
Yeah.
think that's the one of the existential threats that we face, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I think, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think one of the things that would be interesting in terms of your research, Cassie, is as these models get integrated into universities, and I think they should, about teaching AI literacies, would be to expand them to look at the full range of issues raised by technologies such as AI. And including those kind of sort of more humanistic paradigms, like how are we going to live better and more happily in the future alongside these technologies, which, as you say, are inevitably going to be integrated if they're not already done so. So yeah, maybe at Manchester we can develop a super module that's like a brand leader for the university sector. So to kind of finish off, be interested to know how both of you use AI at the moment in terms of your academic practice and what your experience of it is, and then I'll pitch in at the end about what I'm doing.
Yeah, so I use GenAI for two main purposes: materials development and academic writing support. So, in terms of materials development, as a teacher, I one of my daily work is to prepare materials for my classes, and I often use GenAI for ideas for teaching activities, mainly to personalize the materials so that they are better catered to my students' needs. So, for example, sometimes I'm given like a set of materials or like a course book to use, but they don't always work for my students who are at this certain level, who are interested in this particular things, who need to develop this specific skills or language points. So GenAI helps me to personalize the materials so that they can work well for my students. In terms of academic writing support, so I use GenAI to give feedback on my writing. Also, sometimes I struggle to find words and expressions to say what I really want to say, and GenAI helps me with that as well. So yeah, those are the two key ways that I use GenAI in my practice.
Has that become kind of embedded as like a usual thing now? Like on a day-to-day basis, you would use it for those purposes, Cassie?
Um, yeah, I would say, yeah, for materials development. I feel like, in the past, when uh, teachers taught at the same time, taught the same courses, we would meet and discuss, oh, hey, what you're planning to do for this lesson, what you're going to do with that. But since the pandemic, I feel like that has kind of disappeared. I don't see my colleagues that often anymore because a lot of us are teaching online, and also there's since the pandemic, working from home has become much more common. So a lot of my colleagues, they come, they teach, and then they go back home. Or if they don't have classes, they don't go to work at all. So, I have no one to discuss teaching ideas with, and I feel like I'm, I'm more inclined to ask AI for ideas and to talk to my colleague. It's not very nice, but then what can I do when I can't find my colleague?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not, yeah, but it's the reality, I have to say. And yeah, yeah, it is what it is, I guess.
yeah. Be interested to know, Robert, what you experienced when you first went into universities. But thinking about when I was first starting out as a lecturer, what year is that? Like 97. I think there was a weekly meeting of all academics in my department, which would have been about 40 people, right? And I mean, it wasn't always about, how do we teach this better? What ideas have you got? It was often quite procedural and administrative, but it was that kind of opportunity to at least have that social environment. These are my colleagues. Oh, how's your course going? So on. And you're absolutely right, Cassie. Since COVID, particularly that and working from home, that's been disrupted. Robert, how do you experience that kind of collective experience of the workplace now, and how?
Yeah, well, I mean, I live a very odd life in that I work from home most of the time,
Yeah, like
and
many.
all my university teaching is done online. So so yeah, yeah, for me, I guess it's very virtual. But I mean, I'm really interested in this idea of it being a sounding board, and that tends to be how I use it, which seems to be very similar to how Cassie uses it. So I know what I want to do, and I will use it actually in a similar way to how you would use a colleague. Or can you have a quick look at this for me? I've got this view on it. Can you give me a second opinion? That kind of thing. Sometimes brainstorming, but a lot of it is that kind of second opinion type thing, which you would, if I was in the building with somebody, I would do that. I guess it's that social interaction really, but now with a computer.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I do exactly the same for the reasons that both of you cite, which is that real life interaction with colleagues is much more difficult now. I would prefer the real life, but that's not very practical or available at the moment. So as a kind of summarizing question to both of you, what are your, let's just take, I don't know, the next 12 months. What are your sort of hopes and fears for how this process will play out over the next 12 months? So in terms of universities responding to the need to rethink assessment, rethink maybe the purposes of education, how students are going to kind of feel within this environment, which is very orientated towards AI literacies. What are your hopes and fears for where we might be in 2027?
Okay, I can start. My hope is that the universities will offer clearer guidance uh, on AI use, particularly on what should be considered appropriate AI use, because I think this is what students are asking for. This is what staff have been asking for. We want to know if what we do is okay or not. Particularly the students, they're using AI for so many purposes, so many things that they are nervous because they don't know if the use of GenAI is acceptable or not. Uh, in terms of fear, my my concern is that in the next 12 months, nothing will change. Because, it's been 3 years since ChatGPT changed education radically. And between now and then, I feel like not much has changed. We still teach students how to write essays, students still do the same assessments. Yeah, nothing much has changed. So my fear is, yeah, it will be like this. It will be stagnant. Nothing will change in the next 12 months.
Robert, are you more optimistic?
I'm not sure. I'm going to come back to this because we've said that we'll do a session where just me and
Yeah,
you, Adam, just reflecting. And I think let's leave it for that
yeah,
session
yeah,
rather than me
yeah,
finishing
absolutely.
up.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Cassie, for contributing to this. It's been really, really interesting. And I've really enjoyed your kind of perspective from an EAP, a language-based environment. So thanks very much. And I hope you enjoyed kicking around those ideas with us.